maybe not the same way like in the Greek mythology. It was actually interesting because, especially in Mecca, the city of Mecca, it's kind of like about business also. It's a very important commercial city, and because it's on the incense route, it's one of the important trade routes there. And so what the Meccans did is they would honor any tribe's god. And so you ended up with so many gods. And so they would say, oh, this tribe passes through, we want to do business with them. Well, what's their god? Okay, we'll put that god in the Kaaba too. Right? Oh, this one, this god, this god. There are even some reports that there were paintings of Jesus, peace upon him, inside the Kaaba. It's, oh, the guys from the north, they got this. Oh, he's there too. Let's put this. And it's interesting because there is, there in the biography of Prophet Muhammad, it said that finally when, after a period of many years, which we'll talk about next week, when they went into the Kaaba and they were breaking down the idols, the own people who were worshiping them were taking them down, he said, leave the one there wasn't an idol, but it was like a painting of Jesus, peace upon him. It may have been also Mary, peace upon him, but he said, leave that one. It doesn't mean that it's okay, but since they are legitimate, special people to Allah, he didn't want them to desecrate it. But that's another story. I don't want to confuse you all or even confuse the Muslims about that. I don't know. I just like to mention little details that are interesting from here and there. Okay, so idols of wood and stone, I'm saying, no, that's not God. You created with your own hands. But it's not just idols of wood and stone. It's idols of a person's opinion and ideas and people's dogmas. And they say, no, it has to be this way and no other way. And then they begin to think of God in that form alone and never can accept anything else. It is kind of I wouldn't say it's too much of a stretch, but it's a little bit more abstract. But it is actually relevant. And there is evidence that the earliest Muslims, that they understood it in that way. That when a person would, in an authoritarian way, try to assert their opinion, they would tell him, La ilaha illallah, right? Which is, there is no God except for the God. And so, of course, some people, they live, they just go with wherever their desire takes them. And this is kind of the way of consumerism to some extent, at least in advertising. It's like, oh, it tastes good, it feels good, it's this good. Oh, you like this, you like this, you like this. And then a person just surrender him or herself to their desire. I think some people, sometimes they don't like the word submit, they don't like the word surrender, they don't like the word slave. But a Muslim is saying that I'm a slave of the one who is all pure, all holy, etc. And the only other alternative, if a person is not a slave to him, then they'll be a slave to something or to someone else. And so the idea is to free oneself from all of these other things, right? So this word here, dunya, this is just the Arabic word. I think the Bible uses the word mammon. Has to do with love of the material, love of power, status. For you guys who are Lord of the Ring fans, right? This would be like the ring. So, and then of course, polytheism we're saying La ilah, is saying no, there is no God. And then you're going to see the next part, which is except the one God. And then atheism, we said halfway. This monism is just a fancy term, just trying to make everything one. It's basically saying that, a statement that God is the universe, right? But as Muslims, also as Christians, as Jews, we say the universe is God's, with the apostrophe S, meaning belongs to God. So when there's something powerful and inspiring and even sacred in nature and within us, etc., that is just pointing to God. It is not God, right? It's a sign, it's a symbol pointing to something of His majesty, of His power, of His mercy, of His whatever you may see, right? So we already talked about it. So any questions about what Muslims do not believe or to give divinity to? All right. So let's move on here. Yes, sir.
Christians believe
Yeah.
that man is made in the image of God.
Yeah.
What is the view of
Yes. So that man, the question is, Christians believe that man is in the image of God. What is our view of Muslims? We definitely would never take it in a literal way, right? Because we do not give to God any sort of form or anthropomorphism. However, there is a teaching that God is merciful, in fact, the most merciful. So we are to exhibit mercy. That God is all-knowing, so we are to seek knowledge. That God is just, we are to be just. So this is, for those who study a little bit about Islam, about the 99 names of Allah and His attributes, that there are certain ones that we are actually to try to reflect, but at no point does that make us divine, right? But then there are other attributes which are prohibited for us to reflect. So for example, some of His names is Al-Jabbar, which is the overpowering, or Al-Ali, the Most High. We're not supposed to be acting that way. Or Al-Kabir, the big, right? But that God is Kareem, He's generous, we should also be generous, right? So in that aspect, Muslim would have no problem with that. But the sort of anthropomorphism type ideas, and I know, especially people when they have a deeper understanding, they don't see it that way. But again, you have to remember that Islam is coming for all levels of understanding and intellects, so that that statement can be appreciated by a person at all of those levels, whether at the deeper level or at a moderate level or whatever level it may be that they understand. So I hope that answers the question. Yeah. All right. So this next part, I testify that there is no God except the God. The reason why I did not translate it as I testify that there is no God except Allah is because people who don't understand that term, they think it's a reversion back to the tribalistic way of thinking about God. Meaning, like, oh, you guys have the fake God, but Allah, the God of the Arabs, He's the real God. So I wanted to go back to actually what it is that we talked about last week, which is a contraction of the God, Al-Ilah, right? Again, a lot of times you'll see Muslims, they like to make the point that Arab Christians, when they talk about God, they will either say Ar-Rabb, the Lord, or they will also use the word Allah, right? Which means the God, right? So when we say illa Allah, or except the God, it is actually a renunciation of any sort of provincialism, any sort of ethnocentrism. And that statement, there is no single part in the whole Quran which says that Allah is the God of the Arabs. And definitely not saying exclusively. It's always in the more grandiose terms, such as Lord of the worlds. Not just of the humans either, but of the worlds. For those who are interested in theoretical astrophysics, some people say, oh, Lord of the multiverse. Because it is actually used a plural in Arabic, right? That if there's more than one universe, well, it's still, He's the Lord over all of that, meaning He's nurturing, developing, etc., sustaining. I think there was a question in the middle of that, so we can take that. Yeah. So many people argue that Allah is taken from Al-Ilah. And then it's a contraction. Al-Ilah. This literally means the God. Allah is understood, when a Muslim says the name Allah, is considered to be the name that has all of His majesty and transcendence, is to be felt in that name of Allah. It's supposed to bring a feeling of, this is also why the Muslims who emphasize the spiritual side, that they will